I feel like eventually I should get a sound effect. Charge. Okay. Welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing. Tonight's episode, Pitch Got You Singing the Blues. Yes, we are that cheesy. We're going to be talking about pitch in the context of dancing to blues music. The video we're going to be observing tonight is of Jake Hanning and Chantel Pianetta from Easter Swing.
So we are talking about blues, like we said, and basically with pitch in relation to blues, there's going to be a lot more internal counterbalance, and you're going to see a lot more forward pitch and more upright. So that's just kind of what we're going to be looking at.
Yep. And pitch specifically is the relationship between the head and the hips, whereas poise, which is also important, we'll probably throw in a little bit of that tonight, is the relationship between the hips and the feet. So pitch is just whether or not your head is forward of your hips, over your hips, or back. Mm-hmm. And forward pitch is when the head is forward of the hips. Neutral is when it's on top, so on and so forth. So I'm going to throw the video in the chat. Go ahead and give it a watch and let us know when you're done. To the screen share.
So starting right at the beginning here, we're going to look at Jake. You can see he's kind of a little bit pitched forward, but he's also bringing that pitch to the side. So he has this like diagonal pitch almost. Obviously, side pitch is going to be important for the blues to get the swing of the hips. So let's see right here. We have, looking at Jake, his shoulders are over his knees, and it's allowing some balance with those bent legs. Yes, so right here they're both upright, basically, and they're balancing over their right foot with that left foot free. And so because of them being like directly up over that right foot, they can be upright. They do have a slight bend in the knee, but there's not really any need for them to counter anything internally necessarily. Yes. So right here, we have like the body angles that they are both creating. It's like a diamond shape almost. And it's really helpful. Like that's a shape you're going to see frequently with blues that's created by the partnership.
Because that's what allows you to get that kind of tension away feeling while still being close to each other, because often with blues music it's faster music, and you can't get as far away from your partner, and in order to stay connected you have to get your hips back. But if you also get your shoulders back at the same time, you're traveling farther, and it's and you have a lot more momentum to counter, so it's easier to counter weight and shaping than it is to counter momentum at higher speeds. Mm-hmm. Love her face right here.
That thinking face.
Yep.
So we're just looking at this smoothed arced angle that he has that's balanced vertically to post. Andrew said, I was wondering what that face was. Yes, it's thinking face.
Yes. Everybody has their own flavor of thinking face. I think
Chantel's is very specific.
Hers, she looks like a perfect like porcelain doll kind of a situation. I look vacant, I think, when I'm thinking resting depressed face. So yeah, so right here.
Yeah.
And this is something we talked a little bit about with Nick last week, is Jake is putting his left foot out ahead of him and having this shape to help counter Chantel's energy to actually create a post. Are you snickering? Are you laughing at me?
No, I was laughing. No. Robert said, I've been told my eyes get super intense.
Yeah, it's really important when posting as a leader to delay your weight transfer onto either count 4 of a 6 count pattern or 6 of an 8 count pattern right before the anchor. So that way the follow knows where the end of the rope is. It's really important. And one of the ways you do that is with pitch, not just delayed weight transfer.
We should probably take a second and look at how he's actually getting into this shape that he's making.
Yeah.
I do want to mention that with Jake, his angles look a lot more intense, and it's because he's taller.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're seeing like a lot more shaping than you might see with another lead, with him specifically, it is because he's tall.
Yep.
So you can see here, he's planting that left foot, that front foot initially. But then once he places his right foot, he's using that on the ground to press out of, and that left foot is sliding back as his hips move back. So he's using just that right foot to press and straighten the leg to send his hips back. And then he's just allowing that left foot to slide back with it.
Yep.
But you can still see that he is ending up with his shoulders and feet basically in line still.
And the only reason more of his hip weight is to the left of that line is because Chantel is countering him on the other side. If they were to let go of each other, he would fall back.
Right. This is not quite as much of an internal counterbalance because of the angle, and his legs are both getting to a fully straight position.
Yep.
And that's hard to counterbalance yourself when you have those legs fully straightened.
Yeah, you'd have to be bent forward more, have actually more pitch. And then to extrapolate one you said earlier about height, if we think about a shorter person, so we have the same hips, but if we just make them a little bit shorter on either side, this is what you're more used to seeing. It's the same angle. It's just not being extrapolated out as far as a tall person's would.
Yep. So it looks much more dramatic.
Yeah, because if we look at Chantel, she's actually in the same angle. It just doesn't look as extreme because she's shorter. Right.
And she is holding herself a little bit differently than he is. You can see like she's doing this similar thing where she's pressing out of the floor to send her hips back. But she's keeping her upper body in the same place. So you can see she ends up with an arc in her back. Rather than allowing the entire upper body to fall back with the hips.
Right.
I should say that's not necessarily incorrect. It's just what she's doing. It looks a little bit different than what Jake is doing, even though they're, in theory, doing basically the same thing.
Right. And would you agree that the way Chantel is doing it is allowing her to depend less on Jake?
Yeah.
Yeah, because like if she were to send her hips back more and not arch into her back, she would be depending more weight on the connection.
Right. So you would see more of Like there is still a diamond shape happening here between the partnership, but you would see it even more if both of them were like completely relying on the other for that counterbalance.
Yeah.
And so actually this is a great example of the internal counterbalance versus not having as much. Chantel has a lot of internal counterbalance right here.
Yep. And that's because of this arch in the back.
Right. Which is happening just because her upper body like is not going anywhere when she's sending her hips back. So she's not like intentionally arcing her back. It's just happening because she's keeping her upper body in one spot as she's moving around it.
Yep. And then right here, she's very much up over her standing foot. I think what you and I tend to see a lot is this kind of overextension where the follow has the same kind of pitch in the upper body relative to the hips. However, the hips are straight over the feet. So this is where poise comes into account. It's really important that you offset your pitch with your poise the majority of the time. Because if you're just if your legs are straight up and your hips are here and all you're doing is pitching forward, you don't have any power to counter your partner whatsoever. And you're just going to get, regardless of what role you're in, you're going to want to go that direction and not have any power to counter in that direction.
Right. It weakens the relationship of the shoulder and the back.
Yep. So we've talked
Aaron
about this.
said, so the hips really don't lie in this case.
Amen. Yes.
Yeah. So this one is looking a little bit more at Chantel. So you can see, like, because of the way that she's rotating in, it looks a little bit like she's not quite upright with her pitch, but it's just the angle that you're seeing. She is actually like basically completely upright. And you can see that like the center of her chest is going to hit down directly in between where her feet are. So it does look like she kind of has her chest a little bit more forward. That's just because of the rotation happening with that right side.
And then with Jake, it may look like he's pitched forward here, but that's just because of the extension of the leg line. So this is kind of like, we had this conversation with Austin actually, how the dominant gesture of the body can confuse what's actually going on. But if you look at the standing leg, he's actually very upright. The only reason why he's slightly pitched forward is because his free leg is behind him to counterbalance himself.
Yeah. And so what I want to make note of is that he does have both feet like fully connected to the ground here. And he's using that back foot, but he has most of his weight up over that front foot for the majority of the time. So right here, we want to look at the angles. So because they're getting so close, they have to angle a little bit out. But once they come around, right, so you can see that they're kind of both pitching towards the audience, or at least they're starting to. And that's to allow that free foot to swing around rather than to power through it.
I want to point out something that Jake does that I really appreciate. The way he preps this shape for Chantel how his left arm is basically straight and extended out in front of her.
Yeah.
So she's not having to like really bring her frame of her right arm too far across her body. She can still be connected really comfortably.
Right.
It's really common to still err on the side of centering the handhold in these kinds of movements. But it's better as a leader to change your frame more drastically so the follow can follow easier without having to adjust their frame quite as much. So it's a small detail, but it makes a huge difference to follows.
Yeah. Yeah. So for these boogie walks forward, we see that they're both pretty upright. And a lot of times we want to have a little bit more forward pitch in order to free up the legs. But because they are moving through that basically at one level, they don't necessarily need to have quite as much of a forward pitch to keep those legs free.
Yeah, because they're also down into their knees enough and their heels are released off the floor. That helps allow them to be more upright.
Yeah. And you can also see this prep that they're both going into. So you can see them both kind of rise and then fall ever so slightly, which is also helping with the lack of need for a pitch forward. Because here you're freeing up some space and then you're just sinking down rather than coming up over like more of a locked knee or like a straight leg.
And Chantel also creates more space for her footwork by really swinging her hips, because that also, when you settle into a hip and let it swing to the side, like right here, her left hip is higher than her right. That allows her right leg to be free to come forward.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
You want to draw some lines for her hips there when she's switching?
Yeah.
It's hard to see. I can see it, but it is hard
I know.
to see.
All right. Okay. So we got a hip over here. Line here. And then right there. So if we go back and forth. You can also watch the Easter Swing logo on her shirt, because that, see right here, the G comes up, and then the S goes up. G goes back up. Yeah. So watching the swing. Ha! Okay. I'm not proud of that joke at all. Okay.
Yeah, and I just wanted to point out that it's that same thing. This looks really, really dramatic because of his height and because he is so low to the ground to press through. And it also looks a little bit more dramatic because he has one leg out in front of him that is very straight.
Yep.
But you can also see that his shoulders are staying pretty much above that that right foot once he gets committed over it.
Yep. And then another thing I want to note about this, because not only aesthetically does it look more dramatic when Jake gets down that low and has that extreme shape, but I want you to notice how it allows him to actually communicate to the same height as Chantel's core. So he's actually leading her center forward onto the one, instead of forcing her to compensate for his higher center, he's bringing his own lower to be more comfortable for her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is why I believe in the majority of these starts to whatever pattern he's going into, you will see more of that positioning from him.
Yep.
So right here we have this little turning sequence. Call it a telemark if you want. Whatever. Oh, Erin said, what if you're a short lead with a follow and a higher center? Any adjustments we'd need to consider?
Oh, yes, definitely. And we are eventually going to do an episode specifically on that. So this is just a teaser. One of the things you can do as a shorter lead is project upward. And think about kind of planking back from your knees a little bit. So you bring your hips forward of your feet a little bit and plank back. Think of Neo from the Matrix from the knees. So that way your whole front of your body from the shoulders to the knees is not projecting forward. It's projecting up ever so slightly. And you don't have to like do it to an extreme, but just a little bit will make a huge difference. And then the other thing that is magical, I cannot emphasize this enough, as a tall follow, when a leader who is shorter than me lifts the handhold by like 1 centimeter, like not much, just lifts it by 1 centimeter on one, it helps me feel a forward lead instead of one that is also down into the floor. Because it's really easy as a leader because of the kind of swing from the shoulder that the arms tend to have naturally when the leader is shorter. If they're leading both a strong one back, but also swinging their arms from the shoulder, that gives information that the follow should go down, because that ends up being, so the arm goes from this position to this position, but when the follow is taller, the net result is down. So if as a leader you go from here to here, just a little bit higher, the net result is forward for a tall follow, and that is magic. Anyways, but yeah, we are actually going to do some specific episodes in the future on shorter leaders and tall follows. So stay tuned for that, because I could wax poetic about that for hours. Okay, back to the beginning of this telemark sequence.
Yes. So what I was going to mention is that you can see they're both really upright for this passing turn sequence, and that is because they really need to have as much space as possible when they are turning so closely to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're kind of in passing with rotation, it's going to hinder more than help to have any kind of like pitch one way or the other. You really want to be pretty neutral.
Mm-hmm. Especially as a follow when you're traveling, because like if you're traveling during a turn as a follow and you're heavily pitched forward, for example, as soon as you start coming out of the turn and it's your job to scroll away back to tension, if you're forward pitched, it's going to take you longer to reestablish the tension, because you're going to need that extra beat of music to get yourself up over your feet. And what's worse is if you don't realize that's something you have to do, you stay in a forward pitch and then you never actually find the tension at all. Yeah. And then there's this awkward one where the leader doesn't have anything to lead, and you don't have, and as a follow, you don't have anything to connect with, and it's just a a whole kerfuffle. So making sure you're not too pitched forward out the end of a traveling turn as a follow is really important.
Mm-hmm. And, I would even say that, like, when you're being drawn forward as a follow, it would be more helpful for you to just come upright rather than stay in a pitch. No matter, like, where you're coming out of, it's going to be helpful for you. You're going to be able to, there's a word that I want. React. That's the word I want. You're going to be able to react a lot faster to whatever's coming next if you move out of that pitched position as you're coming forward.
Yep. I think you had something marked for this, but I'm not sure.
I did. So I think I was just going to say that they're both staying very upright. And even though they're ending up like leaning away from each other, it's not so much like that they're changing their pitch, but they're just literally leaning their upper bodies away from each other. So if you were to let go at that moment, you'd probably stumble forward.
Yep. And you can even tell that because if you watch Chantel, she's leaning. And then there's a point where she has to pick up her right foot and put it underneath herself right here.
Yep.
To be able to be stabilized.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think you wanted to talk about Jake's double resistance here.
I believe I did. So for double resistance, you really need to be in a position where you have some extra space for your legs. And that really means you need to be pitched forward. If you try to do double resistance when you are just like upright, it's not going to create that reaction that you want. Erin said, what is double resistance? Heard that term a lot. So do you want to explain that or do you want me to explain that? I'll let you explain that.
All right. I need to think numbers for a second. So if you think about a 6 count pattern during your anchor, 5 and 6, you're gradually increasing into tension, right? So you have your post on 4, and then you start increasing the tension in the connection through count 6, and then you release it on 6 and into the 1 of your next pattern. That's your basic. Double resistance is where you hit the end tension on 5, move back into compression on and then go back into tension on 6. So it's an away towards away action, away on 5, towards on and, away on 6. And the amount of tension is greater on 6 than it was on 5, but it still feels pretty intense on 5.
Yeah.
So you get this kind of like away towards away kind of accordion situation going on.
That's one way to describe that. Yep.
Yeah, I'm trying. What's really interesting about double resistance is as a leader, you need to be not only internally counterbalanced, but you also need to pitch and counterbalance your partner.
Mm-hmm.
And that requires not necessarily a lot of strength. It just requires like thinking about it like a chess player, being strategic. Like where am I going to put my weight to counter my partner? Whereas as a follow, you have 2 ways of following it. You can either absorb it internally and not travel very far, or you can take full steps and actually move a lot while you do it. So I think actually one of the videos we watched in the after party with Austin, with YouTube DJ Austin Coyce, it was Melissa and Kyle, I think, from the US Open. Like they're Strictly, is that it? And there's a fair amount of double resistance in that video, and you can see I'm exhausted watching Melissa do it every time, but Kyle is supporting her to the extent where she can take full steps like back towards back, because Kyle is counterbalancing her. But it's like, I'm not sure, can it ever go the other way? I don't think it can. Like as a leader, you really need to support the follow for that energy. And as a follow, it's up to you whether or not you want to travel with it or if you want to do it internally.
Right.
Did that make sense?
I think so.
Okay.
Made sense to me. I think it made sense to everyone else.
So we are looking at this bit of double resistance here. So this one's not quite the simplest example because there's some rotation involved. Right. But right here is arbitrary count 5. And they're hitting tension. They're moving towards. You can see it from Chantel, towards, and then away again.
Yeah. And you can see with Chantel, like, she is actually moving her feet quite a bit. Like, it looks like she's going to move forward. But then she uses that foot placement to send the hips back. And I do want to say that double resistance is not something that is used as much as it should be, just overall. And it really does need to be used in blues. That's something that you don't see as much now, specifically. Like, if you watch more current blues dances from maybe like All Stars or Advanced, something like that, you're not really going to see any double resistance, and that needs to be there. Like, that is a key component of blues that it tends to be missing. And that's really what gives the blues more of a swinging look. Erin said it's like a hitch. Yeah.
No.
Kinda.
So a hitch is where the emphasis is on count 1 of the new pattern. Double resistance is happening during the anchor of the previous pattern. So often double resistance results in a hitch. Because you just did a lot of work, so you want to like take a break for a second. I like being a lazy dancer. It's great. I highly recommend y'all join me. Anyways, and then another thing to pay attention to is the center counterpoint. If you are unable to maintain a center counterpoint, double resistance is going to be a struggle for both you and your partner. And you can see right here, the only reason it's arcing through space right now is because of the rotation they just had. But starting about here, notice their hand hold doesn't go anywhere as they finish the anchor.
And I would also add in, like, their upper bodies as a whole, like, are not really going anywhere. It's the lower bodies that are really doing the majority of the work. Like, you can see the hips swinging underneath and forward.
And that's crucial for Jake. But again, this is one of those places where Chantal could be choosing to take a bigger step back right here. But she's choosing to leave her upper body where it is and let her hips do the work. Because that requires less energy. I'd highly recommend going and checking out that Kyle and Melissa video from, do you remember which year it was that we watched the US Open?
Was it maybe 2018?
Maybe.
I don't know. I don't remember.
I think it's an older video. Anyways, maybe we'll figure that out later.
I would say if you're wanting to go watch like blues for double resistance, Parker and Melissa.
That one.
Great.
And actually we covered one of their videos in an earlier episode, right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and there was a lot of double resistance there.
Mm-hmm. I think that was the one from ESS, wasn't it?
No, I don't think so. I will do sleuthing and link it in the replay. And I think that was, yeah, and I think that was before you were joining us consistently, Erin. So that's an episode that would totally be worth going back and taking a look at. And for those watching the replay, hopefully the link to said episode will magically appear above at this moment in time. You wanted to talk about this.
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to look at the upper bodies for both of them. You can see that there's like, it's not a diamond like we see at the end or beginning of a pattern, but you can still see some arc in both of their bodies, and they really need to have that, one, because they are so close, and two, because they need to have some freedom for their legs to do this little movement that they're doing. If they were both just, for the most part, upright, you wouldn't be able to stylize this at all. Like, you would kind of be stuck in that one position. But because there's so much space between the hips, they both have a lot of space to do some movements.
Yep, they're stepping very close to each other's feet.
Mm-hmm.
So they're actually sharing a center point for the rotation, an axis for the rotation. Mm-hmm. And their hips are further away than their feet, and their hips are also further away from their heads.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to pay attention to where Jake's arm is. It is almost, it's pretty much fully extended. It's not overextended, but it's fully extended, and it's to his side. It's to his right. A lot of the times, so if we look from a bird's eye view right here, so we got bird's eye view, Jake's head, and his arms, right? His arms going this way. I see a lot of the time leaders try to have their arms in front of them.
Right.
And you can't get correct counterbalance with a shared rotation like this if your arm's in front of you. Because in closed position, the center counterpoint of the connection is either the leader's elbow or the leader's shoulder. Usually it's the leader's elbow, but in this instance, it's Jake's right shoulder, because you can watch his right shoulder is basically the center of the whole situation.
Yeah.
And for a center counterpoint to work, you need to have equal and opposite on either side. Mm-hmm. And if there's like a bend in that shoulder joint, instead of it being straight out to the side, it doesn't have equal and opposite.
Since you were talking about his shoulder, I do want to mention that because of the way that Chantel is shaped into this, her shoulder is like overlapping almost where his is. So her shoulder is kind of also being rotated around to an extent.
Mm-hmm. You wanted to talk about this footwork section.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just wanted to look at that, the forward pitch that they both have going into this, because they're doing some more like blues styled footwork. And like we were saying, like, you really need to have that forward pitch if you're wanting to free up those legs. And you just, like, this is a great example for both of them of doing a lot of leg work.
Yep.
And even when we see them moving back away, they're not changing that pitch to go past upright. They're staying forward still.
If you wanted to talk about Jake's pitch right here.
Yeah, this is just what we were mentioning earlier, where it looks like more of a pitch than it is just because of the way that he's extending that back leg. So like you can see, he's planting that front foot and then he moves away from that point. Yeah, so you can see as he plants that, like the ball of the foot, he lets everything move away from that point. Mm-hmm. So we're not pitching forward. More so than he already is at.
And then you wanted to talk about
this. So I was going to say, this right here is the only example that we see of them both going into a back pitch for this dance, really, together. And it's because of the way that they're going into this. They're reaching out with the foot, and so they're allowing the lower body to swing out in front of like the head and the upper body. But even still, like once they start traveling a little more with it, they're getting more upright over themselves. It's just like at the very beginning of this, like you can see a very clear backward pitch from both of them. So like right here.
Yeah, you can see it really clearly in Chantel.
Mm-hmm.
Ever so slight.
Yep.
And then with Jake right here, you can watch as his hips go a little bit faster than his upper body. So his hips are going out in front of him ever so slightly.
Yep.
And this brings me to probably my main soapbox of the evening. So kind of like when we asked the leading question of Austin and Janelle, it's like, do you prefer fixed or variable frame? And they were both like, variable. They were very
aggressive about it.
and we agree. And it's the same thing with pitch. You need to be able to have a variable pitch to be able to counterbalance yourself properly, depending on what you want to accomplish. Because while I understand kind of the training wheels concept of finding your kind of home base pitch, so you always have a place to come back to that you're well practiced in.
Right.
If you lock yourself into that pitch and then you try to do other things that require a different pitch, you're just going to mess yourself up. And so understanding what different pitches allow you to do is really important. And the ultimate goal is to understand both through your proprioception, which is your sense of where your body is in three-dimensional space relative to itself and the space around you, but also your interoception, which is your felt senses. So like hunger and thirst fall under interoception, but so does pain or pleasure. You need to understand what it feels like in your body to be counterbalanced. So that way, at whatever point you're at, you know what to do to internally balance yourself. Because only when you understand that can you add on the complexity of counterbalancing your partner on the other end of that.
Right.
All right, soapbox over. And then you want to talk about this one. or Jake changes pitch really quickly.
Yeah. So if you just watch his upper body, like it is moving, but there's still a lot more happening with the lower body to create some different pitching. So because he's to the side here, it's a fairly quick change for him to go into this next pitch. Okay, so he's upright and he has a little bit of angle in towards Chantel. And then we have quite a bit of lower body movement, and we're rotating around with that upper body. But like, just because it is a quick change of pitch, like there doesn't need to be a bunch of excessive movement with the upper body.
And another thing that's really neat to pay attention to is he's actually using the momentum of his free arm to initiate the first two changes. So watch his free right arm right now. He preps it in, and then he swings it. And watch, so his arm swings first, and then his hips follow. So his hips are just riding the momentum his arm created, and then his arm is starting to swing back the other way before his hips follow.
Yeah.
I think this was another one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just looking at that angle that Jake is getting into again. He's going from like pitching his upper body kind of towards the champs in the back. And then he's allowing the like swing of the hips to change where his pitch is at.
And again, he's shortening his height this much to help Chantel feel a lead that's straightforward. Yeah. It's matching the height of her center. One more time. And then I think there was one more thing you had marked.
Yeah, it was right here where we have the side step that he's taking while he's pitched towards Chantel.
So this one?
So really he's just staying in that same position and kind of catching himself as he's falling.
Yep.
More than like he's intentionally moving them both that way. Which is why he is ending up able to stay towards her while they're both progressing down slot.
Yep. Here, I'll back up a little bit more. Right here. So he steps onto his right foot and he starts driving off of it immediately. And that's what's actually leading Chantel instead of the strike.
Yeah.
So one thing to really pay attention to as a leader is it's not your foot strike that leads the follow, it's your weight transfer. And manipulating the timing of your weight transfer as a leader is crucial to actually leading what you want to lead. So yes, your foot strike needs to be on time with the music, but the timing of your weight transfer in relationship to that foot strike is different depending on what you're trying to lead. If it's a one, if it's a post, it changes. And it's really important to understand that relationship. And funny enough, that's what we're working on in our Patreon this month. Woohoo!
Yep.
It's like we're organized.
All right. Any other questions, guys?
Nope.
All good?
All right, cool. Thank you for joining us. As
Thanks for
always, we'll be back next week with light versus heavy connection. Very excited to wax poetic about that one.
Yep.
Should we announce who our next guest host is going to be?
Sure.
Yeah. So on August 13th, now Oreo leaves, of course. Hello, I'm back. I am comfortable once again. Okay. On August 13th, we're having our next guest host, Bryn Anderson. Very excited about that. And I'm not going to give away anything else except it's going to be extra zany and fun. Don't miss it.
It'll be a special episode.
It's going to be chef's kiss. It's going to be beautiful. I'm excited because there's going to be some surprises involved.
Mm-hmm. It'll be a fun one.
It's going to be great. So,
can't we bring puns?
Puns, yes. BYO puns.
Still. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much.
We shall see you next week.
I see you looking at me. I thought it through. I have this horrendous tendency to say Chantal instead of Chantel. So tonight I am going to always over-enunciate Chantel.
In case y'all are wondering.
Myself. I'm working on it. I'm getting better. Because I really respect you, Chantel, if you're watching this later. That's great in slow motion. I gotta go back.
Her face is getting really close to his shoulder.
So close. The towel across Miles' shoulder in the background keeps making me want to put a crown on his head. I don't know why. It's like a...
It looks like a sash.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, you know those t-shirts that's all of the emotions and it's a whole bunch of stormtroopers? And it's the idea that they're... Now imagine that, but all of your friends thinking faces on a t-shirt. I want to see that. That sounds great. Anyways. Oh, my cat's about to jump on me. Oh, dear. Oh, no, honey. There's not room for you. Oh, no. He wants into my lap. This is not good. This is not going to end well. Oh, hi. Oh, hi. Oh, hi. I take it you can see what's going on. Oh, geez. Mm-hmm. Yep.
All I can see is cat.
Yeah. Technical difficulties, people. Please hang tight while I let my needy boy abuse his power over me. Okay. Anyways. And we're back. All right.
Aaron said if he fits, he sits. That's the law.
If he fits, is pretty much. Yeah, that is accurate. Oh, no. He's adjusting again. Oh, no. Hi. You need to not help, honey. Oh, no, he's purring. I am bracing the lap desk with my knees. My cat is trying to... he wants to silence
maneuvering.
Hi. It's not as bad as driving the steering wheel with your knees, but okay. Also, my monitor is now farther away. When the leader's shorter. Whoa, I can words. When I'm still focusing on keeping my knees spread out so the lap desk is staying stabilized so I can gesticulate. My legs are gonna be sore tomorrow.
Sore from sitting.
Yeah, sore from sitting and holding up the lap desk because my cat is needy this week. Yes, you are. You are so needy. Hi. Okay.